Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, in which three rabbis from Englewood, New Jersey, each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the Parsha, and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Rabbi Chaim Pupko of Congregation Avat Torah, and I'm joined by my dear friends and colleagues,
Rabbi Akiva Block, Kilat Kesher,
and Rabbi Daniel Goldberg, Eitz Chaim, the Englewood Steeple.
To sponsor an episode of the One Pasuk podcast, visit onepasukpodcast.com and click on the sponsorship link. And please take a moment and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform.
Our one pasuk this week from Parshas Naso is Perek Vav, Pasuk Yud Gimel, chapter 6, verse 13, וזאת תורת הנזיר, about the Nazirite who has taken a vow, a temporary vow of asceticism, and this pasuk refers to his return back to normal life, where he has to undergo a certain ritual and bring certain offerings, certain sacrifices. וזאת תורת הנזיר, this is the Torah of the Nazir, ביום מלאת נזרו, יביא oso el Pesach ohel Mouad, on the day of the completion of his Nazir term, comes, or Yavii oso, to the opening of the Ohel Mouad. Torah goes on to discuss the offerings and the sacrifices that he must bring. Rabbis, what do you got?
Sure. The aspect of this pasuk that most readily jumped out to me is the language of Yavii oso, right? That he brings him. So the question is, who brings him to the Ohel Mouad? And the Mefarshim generally agree that he brings himself. But the way that it's stated is almost like there's a kind of distance between him and himself. It seems like there are two actors here, but the formulation is such that it's strange and striking. And I saw a beautiful explanation for this formulation from the Meshech Chachma. It's one of the first Meshech Chachmas that I ever learned, actually. And the Meshech Chachma explains as follows. He says, who is it who becomes a Nazir, who takes this drastic step in their life to become something of an ascetic and enters this extreme corrective chapter in their life? So it's a person who felt that they had lost some sense of control, and they feel that they were overly indulgent and giving in to all of their temptations or whatever the case may be. And the experience of becoming a Nazir gives you your agency back. Right? The point is to give you your control over yourself. And the amount of time you can choose to be, you say, I'm going to be a Nazir for a month, but you could be a Nazir for 5 years. So how do you know when that Nazirus has achieved its goal? So it's when Yavii oso, when you have the ability to now will yourself to do something, when you can bring yourself, almost like an objective observer of yourself, this is the right thing to do. And despite the fact that I may not want to do it, I can bring myself to do things. It's like I think about the experience of, I don't know if you've ever taken a cold plunge. Have you ever done a cold plunge? No. So I was once on the precipice of doing a cold plunge.
No, thankfully.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't do this. And there happened to have been a chassid right near me.
Was it just the Groz mitzvah in Tzfat?
Right. It could have been, right?
I'm sorry, the Arizal's mitzvah.
It could have been. This chassid said to me, you have to tell yourself, I'm the balabayas. I'm the balabayas of my body. I'm the balabayas. You jump in. Yeah, that's to me that feels like Yavii oso, right? I'm the balabayas. The Nazir attains the level of being his own balabayas.
I love that concept that we're in control. And so often exterior forces dominate or move us one way or the other. And I think that's one of the explanations why Kiddush HaChodesh is the first mitzvah in the Torah. I believe there's a medrash that says, HaChodesh hazeh lachem, HaChodesh mosur lachem, ve'ein atem mesurim lachodesh. That we're in control. We control time. We're the masters of our own destiny. And in many ways, to view oneself as an other is part of the path to gain a certain sense of control over our own lives.
And it's self-mastery, right? Meaning me in the brain has control over me in my gut and my heart.
There's a term that Chazal, not so much Chazal, but the Bali Musar use it. There's a concept of bein adam lamakom, there's a concept of bein adam lechavero, and there's a concept of bein adam la'atzmo. That there are certain things we do to advance ourselves and cultivate our own character that we do for or to ourselves. And it's an important lesson that we seize the moment and actually.
Yeah, I also think something that's very accepted in American culture is like follow your heart. What could be more trite than saying follow your heart? And it's like, "V'lo sasuru acher levavchem yacher einechem," right? We say in Kriyat Shema, not to stray after your heart. Your heart can lead you astray. And that ability for your mind to dominate your heart is as a madriga.
There's some schools in psychology today that understand that as much as we have free will and free choice, we are so controlled by our habits, and we are so influenced by forces like, in a way that's beyond our comprehension, that they compare the human mind to a rider on an elephant, right? This elephant is moving along by its own force, and you can nudge it a little bit in this way, nudge it a little bit that way, but it has its own inertia. And I've thought about that a lot because we're creatures of habit, and we think it feels like we're making choices, and we are making our own choices, but very often our choices represent a pattern, or a pattern of behavior, right?
Overdetermined.
Think about somebody who wants to eat better and constantly struggles, right? They want to, they have a desire, they can make the choice, but yet the compulsions are so difficult. And so when you guys are talking about restoring agency, that's a great idea. It's a great reading on Nazir. And I think that is one of the primary lessons. I think it's harder than we let on.
Definitely harder than we let on. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. One need only look at the fact that this person who seeks to restore agency actually literally divorces themselves from society.
I think to stay with the diet model, so I think many diets have 3 stages, right? There you start off really strict. You cut out everything. And then a second stage where you're in the middle. And then a third stage where you're supposed to stay on for the rest of your life. And the point is, if the third stage is really what's sustainable,
why not just start there?
Why don't you start there? Because you have to take that extreme measure, establish control over that you're eating, and you can come into
the Rambam in Hilchos Deos about character. The golden mean is the way to be, but if you are on the extreme bad side of a particular character trait, the way to start is to actually move to the other extreme. So maybe that's what it's meant to be.
But to make it a little bit more difficult, if we talk about what we've learned from science in terms of real chemical dependency, that there are real biological reasons for why a person becomes addicted to something, it's even more difficult because now you talk about Yevיא so it's like bringing his body, looking at the body as the other. I think science has borne that out. You really are fighting yourself, right? The chemicals in your brain guide you in a certain way. Your conscience or whatever other part of your brain wants to go in a different way. So actually, I think what you brought out is actually very prescient.
Would that all extremists in the world state explicitly that the reason for their extremism is to bring the world back to moderation? Wouldn't that be great? Yeah.
So that actually brings me to what I wanted to talk about, because
I was trying to set you up there, Rabbi.
It was perfect. Because I was going to start off in a similar way to the way you were saying, Rabbi Goldberg. So Yevיא so, we're not sure what the it is, right? So Rashi, Chazal say Yevיא so means he brings himself. Pashut Pshat, which is not so simple. What is oso? It could be the only thing that he really actually brings to the Beis HaMikdash is his hair. He's bringing his hair together with the korbanos that he brings on the Mizbeach. And if you think about it, in other instances in the language, the hair seems to be a focal point in this nazirus, in the sense that it's the only thing that's brought to the Mizbeach, and it refers to his hair as nizro. And the word nazir could come from the word nazir, which means crown. We see it by the Kohen Gadol as well. So if the focus then is on the hair, so then if we think about it, the process of nazirus is a person being told to let your hair grow. The hair that is your crown, that represents you, that is how people see you. If you just think about somebody who gets a very different haircut, like it looks like a different person. And so if somebody takes upon themselves a vow of nazirus, and they have to let their hair grow, and then they cut it, one could say, taking the approach of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who says that the concept of a korban is that we would sacrifice our own self, our own lifeblood on the Mizbeach, but Hashem wants us to live in this world, and so we send this animal in our stead and shed its lifeblood to show that we are devoting our lives to Hashem. And the concept of smicha, of the owner of a korban putting their entire weight on the head of the korban, represents that fact, that the korban represents the person. And so, based on this, perhaps the idea of the Nazir growing his hair and then bringing it and then burning it on the Mizbeach is the notion that perhaps you have someone here who has religious passions and they feel a little bit unbridled and they want to be able to focus them. They want to be able to focus their religious passions. And so Hashem gives them this vehicle by which they can assume this more elevated position and put something of themselves on the Mizbeach. For most people, putting korbanos, putting animals off the Mizbeach is enough to satisfy that connection, that yearning to be close to Hashem. But there are some people who want to go further, and we should recognize that. And Hashem is carving out this area of Jewish practice, providing this vehicle for somebody who feels that religious passion to go a little bit further. And I think the idea is that we should recognize religious passions. We should recognize that they're going to push us a little bit further. But obviously, those two have to be channeled within the framework of halacha. And I think for us nowadays, without nazirus, I think it's something still to be very self-aware of, which is in our yearning to be closer to God in ways that are meaningful for us, we always have to be thinking about, is this religious passion taking me in the right direction? Am I doing the right things? Does it accord with the spirit of halacha? For instance, and I know this is just an easy example that we often talk about, but the idea of celebrating Shabbos by toameha, by having some good food and drink before Shabbos, I grant the sincere intentions of somebody who wants to get into that Shabbos mood. But halacha channels us to say, you shouldn't go into Shabbos on a full stomach, right? You should wait until you eat at night. Right. And so my intention is not to knock Friday afternoon kiddushes, because we already did that a couple episodes ago. It's just the only example I can think of right now where these are sincere things. People sincerely want to connect. And I grant that. But the Nazir and his hair are there to remind us that we have to maintain a certain sense of balance.
That's so interesting. The hair is the furthest step of actually literally putting yourself on the Mizbeach, which is incredible. Exactly. The imagery is also pretty strong because you use the hair to light the fire to roast the korban that he brings.
Yeah.
So there's like another layer there to unpack.
Yeah. But that's the only, if you think about it, that's the only human thing that goes on the Mizbeach. And honestly, the more I think about it and think about Akedas Yitzchak, it's startling that Hashem would have us put something of us. Now, I think hair is seen by halacha as us, but really external. But still, it's crazy.
So I wanted to focus on a beautiful comment of the Sforno on this pasuk, which also notices the fact that Yavii and cites Chazal, cited by Rashi, of course, that Yavii, as Rabbi Goldberg, you said, Yavii es atzmo, that he brings himself. It's interesting also, Rabbi Puko, that you said that Pashup Pshat might be that he brings his hair. Pashtanim on the pasuk, I just always assume, I love that read. The Rashbam just assumes that Yavii refers to the korbanos that will subsequently be explained.
But the Ibn Ezra doesn't. I was surprised. He says Yavii es nafsho.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so not all the Pashtanim are even so convinced.
I stand corrected. I said the Pashtanim. What I really meant was the Rashbam.
The avos of the Pashtanim. The Rosh HaMedabrim actually does say nafsho.
It's interesting that you think of the Ibn Ezra the avos, not the Rashbam.
I do think the Ibn Ezra is the Yavii avos.
We could debate that because actually the Ibn Ezra says he saw the Rashbam, and I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right. Ibn Ezra says he saw the Rashbam and says, ridiculous, it's kfira.
He says that about day versus night during Shishish. Yeah, he said he wants to burn Igaris HaShabbos. Yeah, you're right. The truth is, the Rashbam is a harder line Pashtan than Ibn Ezra, but to me, when I think about the Pshat school, Ibn Ezra historically has been the primary, because the Rashbam was pretty much lost to history. Ibn Ezra was in the first Mikros Gedolos, it was Rashi and Ibn Ezra. So to me, he's the captain of the team, even if there's someone on the team who's technically a little bit taking it further.
I thought maybe you would say that it's because since you have the Rashbam's commentary on Shas, he's obviously not a Pashtan in his commentary on Shas. Maybe that skews our...
No, I think historically, I think in the reception of each of these things, the Rashbam was pretty much lost to history. We had no manuscripts, one surviving manuscript, basically, and had very little impact. Ibn Ezra was, if you look at even in a second rabbinic, look at all the early Mikros Gedolos, so it was always Rashi and Ibn Ezra representing the school of Pshat, Rodfei Pshat, and there are super commentaries on Ibn Ezra and the way there aren't on Rashbam. So Rashbam is... you're right. He takes Pshat actually to a further degree than Ibn Ezra. But Ibn Ezra is more important. Yeah, he's more important.
Okay. Yeah, I would have had the same reaction because content-wise, Rashbam seems to be more of a Pashtan, even though Ibn Ezra certainly is. But Ibn Ezra introduces some philosophy to his Pshat.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So the Sforno certainly adopts the read of Rashi that in the name of Chazal that Yavii Oso refers to Yavii es Atzmo, but offers the following beautiful commentary as to why the Torah chose to paint the picture of the Nazir bringing himself to the Beis HaMikdash. And he says, V'zeh ki omnam kol hakarev el mishi yechadesh davar ba'atzmo, ne'emar shehu muva el hamechadesh al yedei nichbad mimenu. Every individual who comes forward to effect a status change is always brought forward to effect that status change by someone who is more honorable, of greater stature than they are. And he brings examples. Chazeh she'ein chavush matir atzmo. The idea that the imprisoned don't become free on their own. They're always brought forward to be set free by someone, by an official, by some sort of officer. Also, the leper, the mitzora, is v'huva el ha-kohen. He's always brought forward to the kohen by someone else. The sota, who's brought forward, v'hevi ha-ish es ishto el ha-kohen. The woman is brought forward by her husband to the kohen. And the Evet Ivri, v'higisho adanav el ha-elokim. The Evet Ivri is presented, brought forward to the Beis Din for the piercing of the ear. So you have all these situations where a person undergoes some sort of status change, bein latov, bein lara, whether it's a status change for the positive or a status change for the negative, but it's brought forward to affect that status change. They don't go alone. They're always presented or they're always brought forward by someone else, someone of greater stature than them. And the great tragedy of the Nazir is that the Nazir has no one. The Nazir who is about to be brought forward for this shaving process, the process that brings the Nazir back to an ordinary person, and through this he's going to become another person. Their status change is literally going to be affected. Ein nichbad mimenu shiaviyehu. There's nobody who's more nichbad. There's nobody who is of greater stature than the Nazir. The Nazir is the highest that you could possibly be. And so the tragedy of the Nazir is there's nobody above him who can hold his hand and take him forward and bring him to effect that process of becoming another person. Avahu Yavii es Atzmo. He just brings himself because there is nobody else. And I find that interpretation of the Nazir to be so beautiful and tragic and haunting. We're all in work that can be lonely at times. And none of us are certainly, I shouldn't say none of us. I'm certainly not on the highest of spiritual levels that I can say.
Speak for yourself.
That I can say there's nobody above me. But it resonates very much that the Nazir is this individual in society who has achieved the pinnacle of spirituality. And there's great cost to that. The cost is that there's nobody to hold his hand. There's no peer. There's no mentor. There's no one above him who he can look to whom he can say, I'm going to be, instead of the mashpia today, I'm going to be the mushpa. Instead of the person in charge of impacting others today, I'm going to be the one who's going to be impacted. And so I need somebody to hold my hand, to bring me forward, to take me in, and be the person who presents me to the Kohen for this process of reintegration. And it's the tragedy of the Nazir that he's this spiritual being who has nobody else. And it's a cautionary tale for those of us who are in this kind of work. We're certainly not Nazirim, but it's important to cultivate for ourselves a network of friends that can help us and hold our hands and be there for us when we need them, which is why I'm very grateful for this gathering of this motley crew of rabbis who helped me. So thanks, guys.
That's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. It's so interesting that you read it in this tragic light, which I think is very compelling. I think of it as incredible what a human can achieve, right? Because this Nazir is not a Kohen, doesn't have that pedigree, but has made a decision. And look what a human can become. They can become anybody, a man or a woman. Ish or Isha can become a Nazir and be so great that they literally are peerless in their greatness. That's amazing, right? It's like the famous Mishnah Nazir, where Kohen Gadol and a Nazir are walking down the street, and there's a mace mitzvah. Who should bury the mace mitzvah? And it's a machlokes who should bury the mace mitzvah, because they're both on such an incredibly high level. And so just the notion that any person, literally any single Jew, can just say, I'm going to be a Nazir and elevate themselves to this state, I think is actually extraordinary.
Just to clarify, maybe I wasn't clear enough. The pursuit of the Nazir in and of itself is certainly not bad. And it is beautiful, but it comes at a great cost.
Sure.
That's the point. And
I guess I'm focusing on the fact that the Torah gives every person the opportunity. The Torah says every person can achieve this. And that's what's amazing to me. Not that the Torah wants us to necessarily do this. The in Gadol Mimenu reflects just, wow, like he's incredible. We can all get on that ladder if we wanted to. Last Shabbos, I shared the following story in my drasha, an amazing story about Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinrib, who was the executive vice president of the OU. And he says that when he was in his 30s, he was a little precocious and he had a midlife crisis. And he called the Lubavitcher Rebbe with questions about what he should do with the rest of his life and questions of faith. And he called the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Gabbai picked up, and he didn't tell him who he was. He just says, I'm a Jew from Silver Spring, Maryland, and I have questions and decisions that I want to discuss with the Rebbe. And the Gabbai tells that to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and Rabbi Weinrib says that he heard over the phone, he heard the Rebbe say to him, there's a Jew in Silver Spring, Maryland named Weinrib. Tell him he should speak to Weinrib. And Rabbi Weinrib was so shocked, and he said, I am Weinrib. So the Gabbai told it back to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, sometimes a Jew needs to speak to himself. He said, tell him he should speak to himself.
Yavii oso.
Yavii oso, right?
Beautiful.
Connects it. But the idea that, in this case, he said, you're the one to speak to. You're it. You're the guy. Don't come to speak to me. Speak to yourself. And he reflects that was the best advice he ever got in his life. Just to speak to yourself.
That's beautiful. And the second piece of what I was saying was exactly that point. The fact that the remedy is Yavii es atzmo. In other words, it's not, okay, we throw up our hands and say, this is the exception to the rule. This is not the exception to the rule. The idea is that a person can summon the strength to actually bring themselves and treat themselves like that other, and a person can turn inward for that courage to be able to move forward in life.
Reflection.
Sometimes a Jew needs to speak to themselves.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
מפסיק להתקהל, להשתתק, להסתגר, ישמעאל אדום וישראל, בן ויקל לפקודה, אין איש בעיר ובשדה, כבר אין מול מי להתנהל, מגדל בבל שוב מתבלבל. ומה אתה רוצה שנבין מזה? איך מתרחקים ומתקרבים בכאב הזה? רוצה לחיות עוד חם ולא להיות לבד. ומה אתה רוצה שנלמד מזה? ואיך נדע להתאחד בפירוד הזה? עד שניתן לך כתר מלוכה, כתר מלוכה. בין פקודה לויקרא, כולנו באותה סירה, אביב הגיע פסח בא, ואיתו תקווה רבה, שתקרא את רוע הגזרה, לך דודי לקראת קלה, כבר אין לנו כוחות יותר, להתמודד, להילחם. ומה אתה רוצה שנבין מזה? איך מתרחקים ומתקרבים בכאב הזה? רוצה לחיות עוד חם ולא להיות לבד. ומה אתה רוצה שנלמד מזה? ואיך נדע להתאחד בפירוד הזה? עד שניתן לך כתר מלוכה. ומה אתה רוצה שנבין מזה? איך מתרחקים ומתקרבים בכאב הזה? רוצה לחיות עוד חם ולא להיות לבד. ומה אתה רוצה שנלמד מזה? ואיך נדע להתאחד בפירוד הזה? עד שניתן לך כתר